Hello, hello, hello. This is the Modern Longevitarian. My name is Scott Stanfield. Welcome to episode 96. Thank you for watching on Spirituality Gone Wild, and also thank you for watching on LinkedIn. We're also 6 places on Facebook. You can find this on and all the shows on the Modern Longevitarian YouTube channel. Today's topic is the power of story with my guest, Ken Fay. I'm super excited. But before we get that, I want to talk about this. There's 2 things, right? I've been mentioning, if you've been watching my show and you're a regular watcher of the show, Harvard Business Review posted on Instagram just probably about 3 weeks ago now that 85% of their survey respondents said their general well-being has declined since the start of COVID-19. That's a year, guys. Everything's gone downhill for 85% of the people out in the world. 50% said a decline in their mental health. Now, I want to add something else in here. The CDC just released 2 days ago that the life expectancy by state, and they also included the entire nation of the United States, has declined. Life expectancy declined by 1 year in 2020. And they also listed, and the first bullet point that caught me and stopped me in my tracks, said if you were born in the American South, I haven't lived in the American South since 2002, so almost 20 years, 19 years we left. If you're born in the American South, your life expectancy is going to be lower than it is if you live in other parts of the United States. My state that I was born in, South Carolina, ranks number 43 in life expectancy. So what does that mean? It means our environment has control over our life expectancy. And why is that, right? Environmental, and let's put this in play, epigenetics. Your environment controls your genetic expression, right? Also, your environment may control your mindset, which is what I'm getting at. Your mental health or your mindset may have declined since COVID. Just all amazing stuff when you put those pieces together. Bruce Lee said this, and Arnold Schwarzenegger said almost the exact same thing. The body follows the mind. And you're also a product of your environment. So think about those 2 things. If you want to set up a coaching call with me, discovery call, go to modernlongevitarian.com/coaching. I'll be happy to spend 30, 45 minutes, an hour on the phone talking to you about how you can start yourself on a path, not only to living a longer life, but making your health span match your lifespan. Because that's really what I started with on this path when I started all those years ago doing this. And so anyway, let's just go ahead and switch over. I want to get to Ken. I've been looking forward to this show with Ken Fay. I thought it was going to happen last week, but we had a scheduling thing go on, all that stuff, right? And we talked on the phone probably, what was it, an hour, Ken, when we first talked on the phone, right?
Easily an hour.
Yeah. Easy, right? First of all, I want to say thanks for coming on the show, Ken.
Scott, great to be here. And hello, world. Good to see you.
Hello, world. Yes. So Emmy Award-Winning producer, writer, director, 25 years in the industry. And we're going to talk about the power story. And also, don't let me forget, I'm getting chills right now. I was thinking about your involvement with the comfort dogs, right? Because I think that's something that people don't really know about you on the first hand. I mean, we obviously, you throw out like Scott, national champion go-kart racer. We throw out Emmy Award-winning, this, with you, but we can talk about the dogs as well. But, so how did you get started in storytelling or telling stories or the film industry? How did you get started in that?
It was one of those endless summer days in school break, right? So that's where it started, man. For me, it was like middle school years, one of those endless summers. My brother and I, we just wanted to do something different that day on that long summer day, right? That never ends, right?
Right.
And so we grabbed an old timey camera, and we threw some media in it, and we went out in the backyard and we redid Robin Hood. And that's kind of how it started for me. I ended up being the camera guy, the director, the writer. My brother ended up playing all the parts. And we just had a blast that summer day, man. And we just put it all together. And then, at that point, we showed our parents, and they were like, this was great. Next day, other kids want to get involved. They're like, oh, we saw you guys out there yesterday. What were you doing? I'm like, oh, we're just, doing a movie, doing some stuff. And they were like, can we be a part of it? Can I play a part? And that's kind of what happened. That summer was a summer of storytelling. We just took movies, broke down the scenes, recreated them in the backyard with what we had and what we knew how to do. And we just had a blast. Mm-hmm. So that started the idea of, wow, there's something to this medium of creating something and telling a story and figuring it out as you go. It just grabbed me. And then to actually have an audience watch it, right? And then they're all like, this is so cool. I want to be a part of it. So that's kind of the beginning of how it kicked in for me. And
Yeah.
from there, I got some more formal training. I actually wanted to be I thought I was going to be a doctor when I went into my older years. I was going to go take medicine. I took a television systems class. That was it again. I was like, no, this is it.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
how it kicked. Yeah.
well, you know what? It dawned on me, is like the story of Robin Hood and how that is held for so many years. I remember, I think it must have been a Disney book my mom used to read to me as I was going to sleep, with the fox and all that
Yep.
stuff,
Yeah.
telling the story of Robin Hood, right? I mean, you and I
Yep.
are around the same age, and so you probably had that same
Yep.
book floating around at some point. But I started like thinking of like Joseph Campbell's, like, the hero's journey, and like the Robin Hood that Kevin Costner was in,
Hmm.
where like he was reluctant to do the fight, but then what happened was his dad got, killed, and then he was like, and then he was in the fight, right? And then it was in
Right.
there, and then a mentor came in and all that type of stuff, and those pieces of it. And so, if you guys have never looked into the hero's journey or Joseph Campbell's story about the, hero of 1,000 faces, there's Shrek and Jesus Christ and Luke Skywalker all have the same arc in their story, right? And all over the time, and do that. But you could probably tell me more about that than I could, right? So, yeah.
It's a motivating factor. So you have any character, any hero, any character in any narrative, there has to be some friction and there has to be some arc to that story,
Mhm.
right? Otherwise, why would you watch it? I mean, think about this. There is truly an art and a science to storytelling.
Mm.
There's the art of it and the craft and how it's presented, and all those other parts and pieces, that go with that. We'll talk more about that. There's the science though too, and that's the part that the science is what connects to your memory, your mind, your heart. There's a science to that storytelling. So if we start talking about a beautiful summer day, and you just relax and you feel those breezes wash up against you, and you're in a field of green and there starts to be these lavender flowers appearing around you, well, you're envisioning that as I speak to it. It's actually causing a memory in your mind to click. I remember being in the field. I remember that breeze. I know what that looks like. That's the science. That's that piece. So you're actually experiencing what I'm describing. And
Mm.
that is a central core to storytelling. And if you can transport your audience into that space, that's where you want them to be, right? But then you really do have a responsibility at that point too. Where do you want to take your audience, right? You want to have something to say, a purpose to say it. What is it you're trying to communicate, And some people do it just for the art of it, just to have something. But in the long run, for me, just in my own experience, narrative storytelling, I need to transport my audience somewhere, bring them through something, and then bring them back, and
Right.
then leave them with something to take with them, you
Right.
know?
Exactly. There's a couple things that come to mind, right? For some reason, Forrest Gump and the feather, dropped in, for me, came in. But I also, there's been certain solo episodes that I've taken the time to craft as the opening part as a story, right? How can
Right.
I capture them that way, right? With, what's a hook, so to speak,
Yep.
with that, and deliver on what the title is. Like, you and I, like, this is like the power of story, right? So at some point I gotta like say, Ken, tell me the power story, right? What, or something like that, till we can
Right on.
deliver on what that clickbait, if you will, or that hook, right? That,
Mhm.
to get people to watch this show. But I've had more engagement on those solo episodes where I literally like crafted in that, like in like a myth way, or old world story way, or hero of 1,000 faces type thing. I spoke at my men's breakfast at church years ago, and I crafted my story in a way that that was like in the, that hero's journey, right? And then, now it's like, even now, my modern longevitarian, right? My parents having cancer, me being overweight 40 pounds twice, losing the weight. Now here's the elixir, right? I'm coming back to deliver what these things I learned on my voyage, right? Those
Right.
type of things, right? When people see that, so I don't, I don't want to cut you off. You probably got something to add to that. Yeah. So,
No, it's
yeah.
spot on. I mean, honestly, what you're doing is you need to put yourself into a space where you are the character within the space you're trying to narrate, right? So as a writer, as a director, and for me, I constantly put myself on the other side of that screen. I want to see from that angle, from every angle, honestly, how others are seeing that moment.
Mm,
And how do I get the emote in those moments? How do I get the emotion? How do I get instruction or whatever it is I'm trying to do. You know, whether it's working on a corporate video, it's doing a feature, it's working on a series, documentary, you need to put yourself in that space of the audience. So narrative is not just creating something and then putting it out there and saying, there it is, and walking away. For me, it's always been the other side. The finish of that story is having an audience react to that story. To me, that's where it wraps. That's the finish. It's never quite done until that happens. And in those moments, I've been in places where I've watched the audience watch the work, right? And, you know, even subtly, because their reaction is telling me that perfect narrative. I'm actually seeing, I'm now being told a story about the narrative, right? It's interesting if you put yourself there, but so you have to put yourself in and out at the same time and realize that it's a conversation. Anything on that screen, any narrative, anything that we produce, any graphics, anything, it's a conversation back and forth. It's like a work of art in a museum. There's a conversation that happens there. You don't just put it on the wall and leave it. There's a conversation, and that conversation can change depending on culture, time, place, venue. It changes. So you want to craft your messaging so that it hits certain points. But then you also realize that it's a message and that can be taken different ways. We're human, you know, we're complicated creatures, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We are. We talked about that before we came live about the complexity of these things, right? There's not 7 steps, right? You know, there are, like I have 8 pillars, right? You know, and the idea behind what I have, something's on my camera, right? Maybe a little spittle came out on my camera. The joys of being live, right?
Live,
you know,
always live.
Yeah, always live, right? So episode 96, there's spittle on Scott's camera, right? Yeah, newsflash, right? It's like, oh yeah, but I don't remember. I don't remember what I was going to talk about, but because I was like, wait a minute.
Well, so we're talking about the entire of the person, the complexity of the human.
Right. So for instance, I wrote this free book. You can, it's just my shameless plug about this book on sleep, right? So, it's 7 steps to getting sound sleep, right? That's really, if you all really look at the grand scheme of things, that's a chapter in the big book, right? Because that's sleep is a pillar. And I gave all the information that it takes for you to create this evening routine and when to stop, eating when to stop eating, when to stop drinking caffeine. Like I'm drinking coffee right now, black coffee, right? And I don't drink coffee typically afternoon anymore because of the half-life in caffeine. It's 6 to 8 hours. So a cup of coffee, right? 2 cups of coffee, say I get, 300 milligrams of caffeine in my system, right? 8 hours later, let's say with 2 cups of coffee, because a cup of Starbucks is going to have about 155 milligrams, right? So, and 8 hours later, I still may have half of that in my system, pumping through my veins. So you may think I'm going to have a cup of coffee at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon to for the drive home or with a friend or something like that, and you plan on going to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and you can't figure out why you're not falling asleep. It's because the caffeine still has that half-life and it's still, going out of your body. Right.
Right on.
And so I didn't know that before I wrote the book on sleep, but now I know that, but there also needs to be 7 steps to breathing the right way. Like using, mouth tape. I got one on my desk here that I keep, doing, and so there's all those different pieces of the puzzle. Right. So over 2 years, I've been sleeping, taping my mouth shut. Right. So there's 7 steps to sleep. To breathing. There's 7 steps to hydration, and there's 7 steps to, eating. There's 7 F's in fuel. Right. And I've written those out as like a draft. Right. So there's these, and there's 9 times 7. Right. I'm going to have this whole book of all these pillars and put these pieces together so people can pick and choose what works for them and do that. Right. But one piece of the story is to sleep is what I was really trying to get at. Right. And we're such complex beings. And we're the same but different all at the same time, right?
Yeah, we have a shared human experience,
right?
But that experience varies widely depending on where we are, who we are, how we grew up, who was around us, environmental factors, physical factors. My goodness, right? But we have a shared human experience. It's in that human experience that we can connect. It's that connection of being human on this planet for the time that we're here that allows us to come together and then understand that. And there's always be conflict, But underneath all that, there is a central drive that I find, and maybe it's a little naivety, but people, generally speaking, the majority of people want to do the right thing.
Yep.
There's something to that. And when something bad happens, you got to look for the helpers in that world, right? I mean, I think it was Mr. Rogers said that, right? But it's true. And I think there's something to that. And that goes back to the narratives we have as people, right? Now,
Right.
you had mentioned caffeine having a half-life. Narratives have a half-life too, right? If you saw a really great film or a story and it stick with you the whole day, it stays with you the whole day, right? Well, come that evening, you're like, I'm still thinking about those 3 or 4 scenes that really stuck with me. Well, the next day, you may only be thinking about one of those scenes, but what I'm saying is that narrative is starting to build itself into you. So you're like, oh, that really meant something to me. When that hero said those lines, or that person overcame those great odds, I feel inspired. That's the takeaway. That's that nugget. And then when you watch that film again, there's something about the science of that. People love to watch reruns, right? I mean, all of us will watch a movie again.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is the joy of knowing what's coming and expecting it, and then feeling that again. There's something to that. And it's also the joy. Not every time you see it will you be affected quite the same way either. And so it's different levels of storytelling. And that kind of sinks in, right? Like a good cup of coffee, right? That sinks in.
Right.
So, you look at story and narrative as a way of impressing upon all sorts of our psyche that we work with as complex human beings. That's why if you see a horror movie, you might be up late at night going, oh man, I don't know if I should turn off those lights. It's still in there. Yeah, I still feel it, right? You're feeling it. If you see something that inspires you, you're like, well, I feel inspired today. You know what? I'm going to go do something. I feel moved by the end of this film. How many films have you seen where you've been left with a lump in your throat? But it was a good lump. It was like that, I feel like I can cry. I don't know. I feel moved by this, but I feel good. That's how the mind can play and work, right? We're all characters in our own narratives, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's the stories we tell ourselves that become the most powerful stories. And that's the stuff for mental health. We have to realize what we say about ourselves and others matters.
Mm-hmm.
Self-talk is real. And so tell yourself the right story, the real story. Everyone out there has a purpose and a place and a story to tell, and you have a voice, and let it be heard. And it's okay. You know what I mean? It's okay.
Yeah.
So,
and your story doesn't have to be highly curated or crafted or, with cool graphics like we have, right?
nah.
I mean, it can just be like, hold up your phone, right? And tell your story, right?
Tell your story.
And do that for whatever it is, right? Because, it's like, like your story is going to connect with somebody somewhere down the way.
Absolutely.
And because look at it this way, right? If it helps you to put words to your story,
Right on.
it's going to help somebody else.
Yes.
Right.
There's certain things you work through in this life that are traumatic, and you need to have that moment of working through it. Sometimes the narrative is what helps to tell that story. And there's times where you need to tell that story on multiple occasions to work through whatever that was. And that's okay. So there's definitely a mental health part to that. Narrative storytelling is powerful. It's not just for film and television. It's powerful. And it's something that happens every single day with every single person on the planet. Everyone has their story. What you did when you woke up this morning, the thing you had for breakfast. These are all elements in your story of your day. I mean, and they all affected you in some fashion, right? We may not think of it that way, but at the end, when you think back on your life and what's happening, what do you do when you sit around with a bunch of your friends? You're telling stories, man.
Yeah.
Right? That goes back to being around those campfires in the early days, where people are around campfires telling stories, right? So, and then what happens? Well, they want to remember that story, so they carve it into a wall in a cave. They want to remember that story and leave that as someone else to read that story, right? What happens after that? They want to write it down on some parchment paper or something. I mean, so you can follow our human history and realize that storytelling is the thing that connects us. We all have. It goes back to the story of the Robin Hood, right? That's something that most people out there, they know that story. It's a classic story. Why is it classic? What is it about that story or narrative? And don't just go back to Robin Hood. Do something even more recent. Take any story. What is it about that story that resonates, that will continue to resonate.
Right.
The human condition, right? It's the human experience that's shared.
Yes.
That's what resonates. That resonates.
Right.
I mean, Greek tragedies, perfect storytelling on the stage back in the day, right? They were talking about love and hate and want and emotion and romance. All of it is, that's the same storylines we have today.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, so what you get back to your graphics, that's the difference. I mean, we have all the tech right now. We say we have all the tech, but in another year, 2 years, 10 years, there'll be even more tech. We're going to be writing on parchment paper right now, right? So we have the tech right now that we can tell stories in such fascinating ways by using all sorts of visuals, right? Mm-hmm. What doesn't change is the human heart. The human heart hasn't changed. So connecting to the human heart, that's heart-centered storytelling.
Right.
That's the piece that will drive the narrative forward. Whether you're trying to sell something, or you're trying to do a documentary or an expose, or just entertain, human heart connection doesn't change. How you tell it, oh yeah, goodness, right? I got cameras and effects and CGI and all that's awesome stuff. And it's more tools for a storyteller to use. But the core center is the human heart. And if you can tap on that, whether you're trying to sell a product, or you're trying to sell an idea, or you just want to entertain, and then you got it. Because that's the half-life, as we were talking about the caffeine of the story. It stays with you. And that's why we like certain taglines. That's why certain jingles stick with us. That's why certain story arcs stick. But it goes back to the classics: man versus machine versus nature versus man versus man. Those are set up a billion years ago. So it's just a matter of time.
Right. It's just exactly. I mean, there's so many things right there. I mean, first off, I want to say narrative has a half-life. I wrote that down. That's going to be etched in talking about a half-life. That quote is going to have a half-life in me, right? Just understanding that, because when you look at it, like there's multiple things and stories that we could think about, right? That leave impact on our lives. And we give them awards. Like, you're an Emmy Award-winning producer, writer, director, those things, right? Mm-hmm. And that the reason we give those awards, because those, here's the movie of the year, right? We see that story, right? This there, right? Like, the ones that come to mind for me are that have had a half-life on me. And part of it has to do with when they come into your life, right? Yeah. Right. Like, for instance, Dead Poet Society, right. I happened to be a senior in high school when that came out, taking English, right? And I made my own English projects. And I loved it, nights. And so I made my own halberd out of an old rake, handle and a street sign that we had ended up in our garage somehow. I've got the jigsaw out and I'm making a halberd and I made a dagger, right? And I told this story around the medieval knights, right? And I made all that stuff. And then the story of the Dead Poet Society about walk to the beat of your own drum and all those things. As a senior coming out of high school, right? I still like that. Keeps that movie, even last night, as when I was up, late, prompted me to watch again, on Amazon Prime for free, right? And it's like, because that and I remember like the lines in it, like a sweaty tooth madman, and I quote Walt Whitman to give a barbaric yelp over the rooftops of the world, right? I mean, right. I remember those things, and then I remember Rocky, right? The original Rocky, right? Yeah. The story of like this unknown getting chosen to have a chance, and then but then the arc of the story where he does become the champion, and then he has to fight. In number 3, he starts taking all of it from granted. And he loses the eye of the tiger, and he has to reclaim that. And that's a cyclical piece of racing. When I race go-karts, right? You be the fastest one for like a month or 2, and then somebody's hungry, and then they catch you, and because you're sitting on your setup, you don't change it. You would cycle down to you'd be the slowest person the next season, right? And then you'd have to cycle. So the key was like, how do you stay on top? And all that. Sylvester Stallone and all those people are doing, telling the story, was tapping into human nature and That's telling you that story over a multiple, an arc, right? And doing that. And, but let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about this, because you talked about there's a science of watching things over and over and over again. Yeah. And there are some things that I will watch over again. Rudy, Rocky, they're all the same for me. They're always these underdog stories, Rudy, Rocky,
sure.
Then Dead Poet Society comes in there. Then I like the movie Warrior, which is another like underdog story, but also family love, right, comes into play, and Cinderella Man, right? It's, you know, wanting just to provide for his family. I think I have a say over my life, you know, that type of things, right?
Sure.
You know, but there's also this, and I tap into this, like, because Tony Robbins talks about these like human needs, certainty, uncertainty, things like that. Most of the time I'm wanting to watch something new. I want this uncertain thing, right? But there's other things like a podcast or a new book or something like that. You get something from it the second, third, and fourth time that you did not get the first time. So what do you think about that?
It depends on where you are in your day and your life. You know, honestly, you know, you could watch the Dead Poet Society the first time through, really enjoyed it, and it stuck with you, right? You went out and you made a halberd and you were like into that. You watch it again as later in the years, it'll speak to you differently because now you've had different life experience, and so you see another level of storytelling that you may not have thought of at the time you first saw it, or even that the writer intended for you to have. But because of circumstances in your life, you've taken that into a different place in your center. And that changes it too. So every time we open up a good book, you want to experience it, that book. And how many books have we read where you see it differently with new eyes? Like you're open because you've already gone through the initial discovery. And now you're on the second level of like, oh, okay, so let me look deeper into that. And then there's another level. Let me look deeper into that even still. And, you know, it becomes this thing where it grows you. You grow, the story will grow with you. It becomes like like an old baseball glove, right? The perfect baseball glove that just fits your hand perfectly. It's like an old friend. You know, how many books and movies are like old friends, right? Why do people watch movies to get for comfort? You know, or you know, it's like an old friend's coming to visit. And in those moments, you can just be relaxed. You can just be in the moment. You can just enjoy what's in front of you without thinking too hard about it. But there'll be something that sticks with you. And part of that is, and everything you spoke to, is overcoming great odds. You know, I don't know if you know this, but you know, it can be hard, right? Days can be hard, right? I mean, right? So there's a human shared experience. So overcoming odds, it allows you to realize that I can overcome odds, right? Sometimes people need to be reminded of that because people can get into very bad places. And again, there's a responsibility to telling that story to show that the odds are there and you can get through those odds. You don't want to let go of hope, and you don't want to let go that you can't do everything by yourself. There is no Superman. You cannot do it all by yourself. You need a community. You need people around you. You need a good group of advisors around you, a good council of people. You need a team around you. You can't do it on your own, you know, and it's okay to accept that. And then you start to have that tribe, you know, we have people, but realize that that's the whole world. You know, I've met so many interesting people in my career from all over the planet that right away, we hit it off right away. And there's so much that we can share, human experience, you know, and then of course we have a production to do. So we all want to be on that and we want to figure that out. But we're looking at it through these different lenses. But honestly, man, it's like, it's a lightning rod of creative energies that come together in any story. It's the trick of the author or writer or director to take those creative energies, focus them into something that makes sense, and then let that energy flow out in a focused stream toward what it is you're trying to do. So there's an energy, there's its own energy to that process. The story behind the story, the behind the scenes, are even more of a narrative than actually the narrative you're watching, right? That's why we love to watch behind the scenes stuff in movies and television.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you know, this happened, that fell apart. I mean, just think of, you know, Robin Williams, right? The actor. He would improv, speaking Dead Poet Society, he would improv so much stuff. He was creative, he was energized, he took the creative energy around him, and he put it there, and it was gold on screen. And, you know, that's human condition though. He's pulling from his own human psyche. He was pulling from the condition of being human and putting it out there. You know, what would a guy say at a point like this? You know, I'll say this, and it's great because it just connects to that moment. Right. So being in the moment is important, and I think by watching those films again, you're putting yourself back in the moment.
Yeah,
you know,
I would think that those scenes where he's reading Shakespeare as John Wayne, or you know, he was in, that was 100% improv, right? And they just happened to put that in the movie, right? It's like,
it could very well be. I mean, you can say,
yeah,
go from here to here. You need to have, some improv stuff. And there's a lot of improv people out there watching this too. You may
right,
have you need to hit a certain target. We need to talk about this subject, but how we get there, I don't know,
right,
but you need to end up there.
right.
And so it's
And,
playing off each other.
right. And those actors and actresses, they go through improv training, right? That's part of their deal, right? And I've been enamored with improv with it for two reasons. One is, and I don't know if we're going to go down this road on improv, but one was Whose Line Is It Anyway? Watching that
Oh
show,
yeah,
right?
yeah, sure, yeah.
And then there was a book that came out probably 4 years ago now called Yes and. I don't know if you saw that book or not, but it was written by Kelly Leonard, a VP at Second City in Chicago, right? And they're actually there is I can't remember her name, but her book is called Radical Candor. Kim Scott. They actually, and so Radical Candor, she was an executive with Microsoft and Google and things like that, where in business, we have a lot of times it's like, oh, I have a problem with Susie. Okay. But I'm not going to tell Susie her problem. And so I have this ruinous empathy. So empathy is like the thread that runs through everything that I've ever researched: relationships, leadership, parenting, friendships. I mean, it's just like on and on and on and on. Like how to hire people for emotional intelligence. It talks about asking questions for empathy, right? Those type of things. But there's also ruinous empathy, where you have empathy for somebody that you will not tell them what they do wrong. And then you bring them into your office and you fire them, and you never told them along the way that they were struggling in your eyes. And they're like, I would have made changes. I would have adjusted. I would have done those things. She's actually paired up with Second City with this yes and improv concept to create work environments that have more improv in them. And you'll get a kick out of this because I don't know if you know this or not, but I was a general manager of a restaurant across the street from the Santa Monica Pier.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And we get a fair amount of actors that come in there.
Yeah.
One of them had to be Wayne Brady, who was on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Right. And, I've always, and I'm working in Park City for all these years and having Sundance Film Festival and stuff. I've had, amazing people. Brad Pitt's been in the restaurant. James Franco's been in. Let me think of Sam Elliott, and his wife were in there, which super cool. And his voice is the same on and off screen, right? It was like really cool, right? And talk to him about the wine that he had and all that stuff, right? And, know their agents and, those type of things. But I've always been kind of like, let me just like treat them like normal people. I don't have to go up and talk to them and things like that.
Right.
Don Johnson served him multiple times in Salt Lake and in Park City, different places over different times, things like that. And being a manager the whole time. But I actually went up to Wayne Brady and I said, hey, I was going to play a joke on you. And he's like, what's that? And I was like, and he actually said, it's really like a favor, right? But after I said this, it's like, I really have been enamored with improv, right? And working in restaurants is improv because the answer is yes before you ask the question, right? Because when you say no, the improv's over, right? And so, and I said, I was wondering if you'd be willing to teach my staff improv for free, right? And he said, you know what? I'm booked right now, but if I had a free weekend, I would consider it, right? And that was a great I had the guts to ask him, right?
Sure.
And B, but understanding that, business and life is really like this unstructured / structured. I want to say yes to this, right? Yeah. And doing that and using those principles to make a more successful restaurant or more successful business and those type of things. And so I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think I've ever told that story online. And Mr. Brady, if you see this, I apologize for calling you out, but but that was it was amazing for me. That was a big highlight, right? To have this confirmation of that and seeing those things happen and come together, right?
Well, listen, man, life is improv. Your day is improv, right? Yeah. I mean, unless it's really scripted out in front of you, how many people do that? I mean, life is improv. Your day-to-day is improv. And so you have to stay in that. And your character is just who you are, genuinely who you are. Right. And the characters around you are genuinely who they are. And the environment, settings, storyline changes. It's all improv. Right. There's, you touch on something there that goes back to narrative storytelling in film and television. And that's the whole suspension of disbelief. And that is suspending your disbelief in what you're watching or the character that's being portrayed in front of you so that you believe it. Once you lose that suspension of disbelief, then you start looking at your watch, wondering what time the movie's over, when can I get up and leave? You know, so it's like a gas and brake pedal that you're constantly on, where you need to have enough of this and enough of that to make that work. But the same would work in improv. You got to have the gas pedal going the whole time, right? You want to interact with your audience. You want to interact with the people that are with you on stage or in front of you, and you want to make that sing. You want to be enjoyable, entertaining, or honestly, you could be very moving. It's not about just laughter. It can really be about moving. And that's what the great speeches are all about. When people give these great speeches, of course, they're scripted, right? So that goes against what I said, but there's a lot of thought and purpose and point put into that speech. You could have the same speech read by two different people. It'll feel like a completely different speech. If you have it read by the right person, the right time, in the right way, with the right inflection, the right pause, that's what's so powerful about that. You can then really reach to a group of people, right? And you know, that's what we do in our world, in, you know, entertainment and documentary, is we think about those things. We constantly think about everything, where the music, the angles, the what's the voice going to sound like, where's it going to come from? You know, the right voiceover talent, for instance, will change the entire story. Either make it one way or the other, shift it on the scale, right? The right people in front of the camera. That's why so much effort's put in front of that. The right crew, the right thing. I mean, you know, so many things affect this, but listen, man, it's improv in a way, but it's improv with a purpose when you start to dive deeper, right? And that's what our lives are, right? All of us have a purpose, and we're doing the best we can every day to make that work. And when you talk about celebrities and such, yet they're all people. Yeah. They're people like you and me. They're people. Now they have different experiences in life, and other things are happening to them, and it's great and what have you, but they're people. They're human, right? They still have that human understanding and human connection. That's why they can tap into that. And when you see them on the screen or something, that's what they're tapping into. That's affecting you. Right. And so it's a narrative. It's a conversation.
It is that, right? And honestly, I mean, this conversation right here is improv in a way. All I had typed out was like, and I didn't even like follow this, because I added in the CBC thing. It was just like impromptu. It's kind of been in my head for the last couple of days. Right. I didn't even follow this line for line or word for word. And it literally stopped with, we're going to talk about storytelling and its connection with comfort dogs. There's no questions on here, right? There's literally like, it's unscripted. This is an unscripted show. And a lot of my shows I have interviewed thousands of people, right? Yeah. You know, over the years for, to work for me. Right. So interviewing for me is something that comes second nature in a lot of ways. One of the things that comes to mind about being real people is, Matthew McConaughey, right? In his book that came out, Green Lights, I don't know if you've seen it, but he's been on every podcast imaginable except mine, right? But he's, you hear him talk about, taking, journaling since he was 15, 16 years old, asking questions. There was more questions than there were answers. Right. And then, now in his early 50s, he's got some answers to the questions, and they put them in a book, and everybody loves it. Right. And the way he spun it. But you watch him on all these podcasts, right? And I've watched probably or listened to 5 or 6 of them. And I love doing that. I love listening to get a different interviewer's perspective on it. Right. And like, there's some like, Captain David Marquet, who wrote the book, Turn the Ship Around, right here. He actually has been on my show, right? Absolutely love his style of leadership, his intent-based leadership. I listened to every single podcast I could find, even people asking him how he used the book as a marketing tool so he could actually get keynote, the behind the, like, why he wrote the book so he could become a keynote speaker. He didn't plan on making any money off the book so he could make money as a keynote, right? Even that, was super cool for me. So I could absorb all of those different things and the angles and, what does this mean? What do you do in this situation? And, what was your, connection to Stephen Covey, and you were in the 8th Habit, and, all of those type of things. Right. But I absorbed that. Right. And so you can absorb like the human element of someone like Matthew McConaughey, right. The all right, and, things like that, and bought the book for my son. My son read it before he read anything else from Christmas. And just a super cool way of understanding that, yes, they are human. They have a different experience, but they're also great at storytelling, which is what, really we're talking about. And that helps them in a way, to express themselves in ways that we, people who aren't on screen or on stage or, those type of things express things. And so I don't know if there's any thread to pull on that, but that's what
there certainly is. I mean, listen, we're all on stage all the time.
Yep.
In our day. We don't need to be on the big screen. We don't need to be on the small screen. We don't need to be on the social screen. We're on stage the whole time. So who are you? Define your why and who you are in that regard. And you're going to be interacting with people, and you literally can change the narrative for the better with folks if you connect to that center with them. And it's about human relationship building, right? It's just human 101. But realize that everyone's on a stage, like Shakespeare said it that way. Shakespeare was right. He was a storyteller.
Yeah.
But listen, all the world's a stage, right? And so we need to realize that what we say has impact on ourselves and on each other.
Right.
Whatever character you're playing that day, and even if it's yourself, take a moment. Just think about what you're saying and how you're saying it. And you could use that. You could use that to tell your story to someone. You could use that to sell something to someone. You could use that to empower someone, give someone else hope. You can use that to really just change someone's life and impact by how you speak to them, by how you are on the stage of life.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than just a business.
Right.
And that's what we resonate with. Right.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? We are on stage, right? And we are, in theory, we have this character description of who we are, right? And that's that self-talk, positive or negative self-talk.
Right. In our own heads we do. And then other people watching us have their description of our character.
Right. Exactly. Right. So like, for instance, right, God, there's so many things I could talk about. We can talk about imposter syndrome at this point, right?
Sure.
Where you could, where that's one element of it where you're like going, okay, it's like, oh, I want to talk to somebody about this, but I don't know enough. And I feel like they'll know that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
A big element of that, I would say, would be like someone trying to sell a high-end wine, a $200 bottle of wine, right? But yet you work at a place that sells a $200 bottle of wine, but you have never been able to afford it yourself. And you've never tasted it. Yet your guests can sit down and they're going to drop $1,200 on dinner. And you're like going, I would never be able to afford that. Right. So you're in a place where you're like trying to sell something, you're trying to sell the Lamborghini, right? But you've never driven a Lamborghini. Right. And it's like, and you can only, like, you read the text sheet about horsepower or tasting notes and handling and those type of things, but you never experienced it yourself. Right. And a restaurant, in an effort to save cost on that bottle that may have cost them $50 or $75, you're not going to open that for the team to taste, because it would hit their cost of goods, and the manager may not get the bonus, or the owner doesn't approve it, or, those type of things. Right. Yeah. So there's those type of things that can come up. But it's super wild that you mentioned this twice, and our self-talk, our own character definition of who we are, either propels us forward into who we can be, or holds us back or sends us backwards. Right. And a Dr. Sierra McCullough, I interviewed him for the podcast before I started doing the live show. And he has a book on diversity, which his whole life work spent on empathy and those things. He said the most addictive thing in America right now is our negative self-talk. The most addictive thing that we have. You're not good enough, not important enough, those type of things, right? And
coming through a season of isolation, as we all have right now with COVID and around the world, where it's a shared human experience now. The entire world has shared that experience of isolation and whatever, however you feel about it, something happened.
It did.
So, and there's that self-talk became even more important during that time. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it affects you. It'll affect your day. It'll affect the next meeting you have. It'll affect, if I sit down in the wrong frame of mind, that's why, you think about writers and they have their muse, right? This is my moment. I feel inspired to write. I got, this is my time of day. I had my best favorite breakfast, whatever it is. The music's playing just right. The lighting is just perfect. I'm inspired. I'm going to write this out. right? You can get lost. And if those things don't align, sometimes it's hard, you know. I mean, as a business, you always produce, right? And that's fine.
Right.
But for the joy of it, for the everyday person, you know, you get inspired by certain moments of your day, time, whatever it is. And so take that creative energy you're feeling, that spark I was telling you about with the lightning rod of chaos, of chaotic energy, of creativity. Take that and focus it into something, right? Whatever that is, focus it into something to create something. And creating things is life. That's the overarching of all that stuff. You're creating something out of nothing. You had a wonderful idea that no one's ever heard of before, man, and you're all about it right now, and you're just putting it on paper, and you're just telling everyone about it, and you're refining it as you go. And that's great. But that has to do with that mindset. That has to do with the mindset. You got to be open to that.
Right.
We all have bad mindsets at times, right? And it's just pushing through that. And, you know, that's why we call a good friend once in a while. We'll say, hey, man, it's great to hear your voice. And, you know, whatever it is, or that's why we have our pets, or that's why we have those things that bring us joy in life, right? That favorite painting, or that track of music, man, riding scooters, man, or being on a motorbike. It's just, you can just let that go and move forward. So everyone needs a little something outside of that, right?
They do.
To re-energize with. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a great segue. You mentioned pets, right? So let's segue into the comfort pets and talk about that, because I know this is something that's a big part of your life and that you spend your time doing, and you're able to impact other people's lives with, you know, through the comfort pets. So most people may not know what a comfort pet is. So let's start.
They're not pets. They're comfort dogs. They're not
comfort
pets,
dogs. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Comfort dogs. Excuse me.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for correcting me there.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk about comfort dogs and just like what that is, and then how you're involved in it, and those things.
Well, that's another narrative, right? So this is a story that's connected. So if I were to tell this story in this way, I was trying to think of a way to tell this story because it's very personal. So this is a story that has a golden retriever, has a golden statue, has the worst experience I could ever have experienced. That's not me, but so many people. It's connected, unfortunately, to death and tears, and it's connected to something so sad. But all this to say that there's a light in the darkness about all of this stuff. And so that's how this all is for me. So comfort dogs are specialized. They're just wonderful. They're wonderful animals, right? There's an organization called Lutheran Church Charities. They're based out of Chicago, and they have a comfort dog ministry program. And they were in operation prior to the shootings at Sandy Hook School. Now, the Newtown, Connecticut is my home community. So I'm from there. I'm from that area. My church is there. My people are there. My family's out that way. That's where I'm from. And when the shootings occurred, I found myself stuck in a narrative that I couldn't get, none of us could get out of, for very good reason. And it was a very hard time. Obviously, I don't have to say that too much.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, I knew personally one of the children and one of the families, and, you know, and I was witnessing this thing happening in my own community, just shattered by violence. Right.
Right.
And how many times has happened since? Oh my goodness.
Right. Yeah.
So you're in it. Suddenly it's all around you. And what was normal 2 minutes before you heard about it is not normal. Nothing's normal again. Nothing's where it was. And so I found myself in this place, and these wonderful people from the Lutheran Church Charities showed up 2 days later on that Sunday. It happened on a Friday morning. On that Sunday, they were there. They were on the ground with dogs and with amazing people to just listen and be present with us, and to provide some sort of compassion, comfort, and mercy in that moment. And that was, you start to process things and trauma. And that part of the processing was you were there, you were being heard, and someone was there to help lift you up. And they weren't from there, right? Because when something bad happens, do you ever think about the world rushing in to help you? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, yeah.
But there they are. And that was the beginning of a door of healing for so many, me included. And that's when I first met Maggie. Maggie's the dog in that photograph you have in the beginning. Now, Maggie's a golden retriever. She was very young at the time. I think was one of her first deployments into something as serious as all this. And she had her sister Addie, was there, another golden retriever named Addie.
Mhm.
And they were handled by these wonderful, amazing people that just got into our community and were just there to listen, cry, be, lift, pray, whatever we needed, man.
Mhm.
Presence.
Right.
So it had a huge impact on me, obviously, and everyone I know. And over the course of time, I, as a church community, we decided we want to do this. We want to continue this, right? Sandy Hook School's right in our town. This isn't going away anytime soon. I mean, if you remember when it was Christmas, it was the Christmas that wasn't,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Right.
And so, I mean, so much pain and sorrow, and then all the funerals and everything else. But so when all that's going through, we decided we want to do something for someone else. We can't just let this narrative sit here. And I knew personally I needed to do something with this. I can't let this sit here.
Mhm.
So I decided to be a co-top dog. They call them top dogs. A co-top dog with another wonderful person named Kathy, and we developed what we called Newtown Comfort with Maggie as the dog, and we ended up serving in our own community amongst our own people. And so when the charities group, Lutheran Church Charities, had, they can't stay there forever; they have to leave.
Right.
And so as they leave and go back to their world, right? And they're still there. They're still there for us even today. Someone needs to take the banner forward. So we did, and we started interacting with our own communities. And these dogs, honestly, it's a bridge of communication that I've never experienced before. Through the leash, there's a conversation that happens. And when you have a golden retriever, what's the first thing you think of? It's kind of joyful, isn't it? Now, these dogs are not like jump up and down. These are really highly trained animals, right? They're calm, they're submissive, they're sweet. They're just there. And as a handler, you get to be there with them, and they open doors of conversation for you. I've had conversations through these dogs with people that would never have spoken about whatever it was they had gone through. And I'm not just talking about Sandy Hook. I'm talking about everything right on through to Vegas. I'm talking about even to Oregon, the fires that we just had, all that stuff. People are open up their heart, and there's that human connection again. There's that human narrative again. And because of what happened to me, and I witnessed my community shattered by that violence, I then can share with others when their community is shattered by violence. I don't know what they're feeling in that moment, never do, but I have something I reference that I know what that feels like for me. And so talk about the imposter syndrome, right? How do you go into a situation that you haven't experienced? And so many people do. And there are so many responders out there. And, God bless everyone who's wearing a uniform that's running out there to save people. And there are other people that don't have uniforms, and they're running in there to save people. And they save people in different ways. So it became a very powerful thing for me, right? As a leader now, as a co-leader of this group, this team. Boston bombings happened soon after. That was the first real wow, right? Local for me, right? Working through that. And then so many other deployments that I've been on that I could go into detail with, but I'll leave it that part at this. Not too long after that, I was asked, we were doing this show continually for Comcast, New England, the New England region, Comcast. And they wanted to do an NBC, Comcast NBC Universal, and they wanted to do a little something about Newtown, right? I'm from there. Do a little story about Newtown, where are they now? I realized that I couldn't tell that story. It was still too fresh for me. This is only less than a year later. This is that far, right? So I'm still dealing with everything. And so I decided I need to do it on something that was positive and healing. Talk about that positive quotient, right? And healing, and something that just this opened up the world so that you would realize there's more to it. So I started looking at it through the eyes of the dogs. So I saw how Maggie and Addie were interacting with our community, and I decided that's the story I'm going to tell. As a storyteller, I'm wrapping myself around the healing, and I'm wrapping myself around these dogs and how they're telling it. Now, how do I tell that story? What's the vehicle I'm going to use? In a narrative, you use a vehicle, right? I decided I need to do it as a children's program. I need to do it in innocence, because that's what we all lost that day. I need to tell the story through innocence. I need to tell that story to children. I want children to watch this and understand, why are there dogs in my town, and what are they all about? I want to know more about that. Well, I hearken that back to well, how do I tell that in innocence with a child's story puppet? I'm thinking, oh, the Muppets are, the Muppets, the puppets, that brings a smile automatically almost, right? Spokes puppet, so I'm like, okay. So I had a good friend of mine named Jeremy Heil, and he built the Wags puppet for me, and he performed it for me in studio. Um, I had, and I was doubly blessed on this project because my brother, Mike Fay, is a director of photography at the same company. So I wanted him to be my guy to go into the field with. So it was myself and my brother to go tell this story, and it kept the crew small. You know, we didn't need 1,000 people. Newtown was already inundated by media
Right.
from all over the planet. So we went in small, and I interviewed with the actual people involved and got cover shots of the dogs in action, and I got the puppet material written and had that performed in studio, and I had Maggie come into the studio on a green screen and do all that sort of stuff, and told this really quick, it's like a little over 10 minutes, mini documentary story of healing that had everything to do with such a terrible event. And I wanted to make it innocent on purpose. So the soundtrack I used, the voicing I used, I didn't go too deep on the subject of what tragedy that it was, but I touched on it so people know, so that kids could watch it and adults could watch it at two different levels, which is important. Anyway, so I created this piece, put it out into the world. A few weeks later, I get the call. It's like now it's, you know, that it's been entered into the Emmys, Emmy Awards, and then yeah, come that spring / early summer, I get the shout out that it's been nominated, and let's go. So ended up going there, and I remember distinctly, I wore my Newtown Sandy Hook pin on my suit and went there and sat there, and I found myself next to Leonard Nimoy, the actor, and he was there for a Lifetime Achievement Award, Emmy. Just incredible, right? And I'm a sci-fi fan. I'm not denying it. I'm a huge Trekkie sci-fi fan, Star Wars, all of that stuff, because I love the narrative pieces.
Right.
So there I am, right? And it couldn't have been wrapped up any better than that. The reasons I was there were the saddest on the planet. The blessing is that it was being recognized as a story worth telling, and people wanted to hear it. And then to have your name actually called and go up and accept the award in memory of those that we lost. It's such an honored place to be. You can't write that. That's that unscripted improv stuff. And then to come back down and sit down and just realize, wow, that just happened, you know? And then that's how all that kind of came together. But these dogs, I'm telling you, they reach into people's lives in ways that you could never do just as a human being. They don't judge. There's no judgment there. There's no barrier to that. They just sit there, and you show up, and you just show up. You just go, and people react to it. And you start to hear their narrative and pull them up from the ground. When I was in Las Vegas, I was in Vegas during the shootings at the festival. And that was a hard time too. I happened to be there to do a whole different project. I was there for that week to do something completely different all week, by the way. That was my plan. But there it is. The shootings happened that night. And that was powerful. But I had a chance to help coordinate the dogs coming into Vegas. And I had a chance to be with people. And it was in that moment that I realized the narrative shifted. As I was coming, in one case, with a bunch of people gathered around having a vigil the very first night, gathered around just the corner of a street. And I happened to be there. I mean, the reason I showed up there is I wanted to let them know that the dog teams were coming to that vigil, and I was kind of recon on the ground for it. As I was standing there just watching them singing softly with candlelight and remembering what just happened like the night before, one of them came out of the candlelight. This woman, it's just like an angel. This woman just walked out of the candlelight, had 2 candles in her hand, saw me, gave me one of the candles, put her arm around my shoulder, didn't say anything, and walked me into that circle. At that point, I realized that my narrative is even more because of because of my own involvement with Sandy Hook, but now Vegas. And now I'm a part of this community too. Another community shattered by this. Now I'm part of this community, but it was this wider conversation happening in my head and with others. And then I had a chance to speak with her and thank her for that. And in the process, she was working with someone who was having obviously a really tough time. And I said, I'm happy to speak with her, you know, having done what I've done with the dog teams at that point and been through Sandy Hook. So I get down on my knees with her, and, you know, and we start chatting just softly, and And I mentioned to her, and I say, listen, this isn't going to be okay right now. But I want you to know that there is another day, and it was that moment of trying to grab onto the hope. And when I mentioned to her that I'm from Sandy Hook, that town, I'm Newtown, that's where I could see in her face, it changed.
Right.
She's like, oh, like there was this connection of understanding that was on a different level. Hugs, tears, but she got up from the ground. And it was a moment of strengthening for her and me at the time. And it's just going through those things, man. And so that's the narrative we tell. That's the understory. That's the behind the scenes of all the other things that we do. It's the reality of it all.
Right.
So having said that, that's kind of how the comfort dogs connect. That's how I connect into those dogs and those teams. And that's how that narrative is then shared on the streets. And getting to know someone, pulling them through the trial of it, right? And giving them a light in the dark.
Yeah.
And a little bit of hope. And that's why we have a responsibility as storytellers.
Right. I heard something a while ago, and I said this on, I think it was probably this amazing story, right? And just chilling to listen to, but also you come out of it with hope, right? And that you can be there for other people.
Right.
And this quote is, without a test, you have no testament. Right. And and we can obviously Sandy Hook and Newtown is a test, and that testament then translated on a level that you can't even hardly explain to that lady on the street corner in Vegas. Right.
No.
And because my connection with Vegas is our daytime bartender at the restaurant that I was managing at the time. And being the general manager, I was there during the day on the days I worked, right? And I would, my schedule was like 10:30 to 9, and so I was there. She and I worked almost every day together, right? She was the bartender. We had one server. There was always a different server, but she was the constant, right? So she would like take messages for me and, stuff like that. And she was there at that concert when it happened, right? And when she came back to work, it was, she needed to know somebody was going to help her stay safe.
Right.
Because what happens is we don't think about, how unsafe a concert could be. Right. So it was almost like all boundaries of safety were corrupted at that point.
Loss of all the innocence.
A loss of all the innocence, right? That something could go wrong in this environment, even though nothing has gone wrong in this environment ever before. Right.
Right on.
And so it was, I've never been in a situation like Vegas or Sandy Hook or any of those type of places, and it's hard to have the empathy to put somebody in their shoes and actually have that feeling of how it was to be there, but hope and security and strength and, some kind words and a hug, or it can go a long way. Right.
They do. You can literally save someone's life by being present in the moment.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the deeper narrative. I mean, I know it's a heavy subject, but that's we need to do something.
Right.
We need to serve others. Right. I mean, that's
right.
me. I need to serve others. So.
Right. Well, it's right. The Twain said, we're talking about storytelling, Mark Twain, right?
Yeah.
Said the two most important days are the day you were born and the day you figured out why. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing your why is huge.
Yeah. Knowing your why is huge. Right. It is huge. Right. So I know that Maggie has a Facebook page too, right?
She does. Yeah. All these dogs. So all the dogs have Facebook pages. They all have social media channels, and you could easily go on, just do a Google search, look up Maggie Comfort Dog Newtown. She'll pop up. And she has followers, and she posts messages, and she posts pictures of her. You can track her journey, right? And all the dogs do. Yeah.
Right.
That's how you can stay connected to them after the fact, right? Because you develop real relationships, especially in moments like that, right? How often are the narratives in real life? When you're with people in the trenches, whatever that trench happens to be, you're bonded, man, right? Whether you're in a restaurant in a hot shift at night where everything's flying around you, you bond with those folks, right? Or you're in the field, or you're literally a soldier in the trenches, man. You bond, right? So when you do that with the dog teams and stuff, you can keep track. You can talk, you can ask questions, you can watch their journey. They're not gone from your life.
Right.
And that's important too. We're none of us can do it alone, man. So it's okay. It's all right. And those that can will, and those that can't can support those that do. And those that, I mean, there's levels of response. It's a ripple. It's a rock in the middle of a pond.
Right.
It's a ripple. And listen, with trauma, studying it as I have and gone through it as I have and dealing with folks who have, literally think of it as a still lake. That's your normal life. Now take a giant boulder and splash it in that water. That's what trauma is. That's what that moment of impact is in your mind, in your body, in your soul, man. Now those ripples go out. Those ripples are affecting everything around that individual or that event, and they're hitting the shoreline of others and causing more ripple, right? And how that pond changes, how your life changes, right? Using that as a metaphor, how that water changes the edges of the pond, what's washed away, what's kept in, how that resettles, how that sediment that pops up within your own psyche settles. That's all important processing. And listen, being within that moment with someone within the first few hours, 24 hours, is foundational time. The clock starts right when that happens. So I just encourage people not to run from people that way, that have gone through it. Be there for them. And so many of your listeners, I know they are, but encourage others to do the same. Be there in those moments. As people run out, it's like a firefighter, right? They run into a building while we run out.
Right.
When it comes to things of trauma and mental health and wellness and all those things with tragedy and trauma, it's okay to go in there, gently go. It's okay to gently show up and just be there. Just be there. Listen, man. Just listen. You don't have to know what to say. Right? There's no right thing to say.
Right.
Whether you've experienced it or not.
Right. And our culture in America doesn't do mourning the right way. Right. It just doesn't. We don't know how to do that. And, and so I've done some research on that, and, even the Bible says, it's like dance with those who are dancing, mourn with those who are mourning.
Sure.
And it's like, you don't want to be dancing with those who are mourning and mourning with those that are dancing, right? You want to match the energy, and that could be in the same day, right? You could be somebody that you is dancing in the morning and something like that happening, or you go to, a memorial service or something like that. Because some people may be celebrating somebody's life, some people may be mourning life, and everybody handles that differently. Right. And one of these things that I learned along the way is, because I was searching for words, like, what do you tell people? And you're like, it's like, I'm here. This is your time for mourning, and I'm here for you now. Right. And there'll be a time when I need to mourn, and, I'll need you. Right. Yeah. And just saying that, in that way, let them know that, like, hey, I'm here for you. Right. And then at one point, Scott's going to need me. Right. To be there. And that's what the exchange is. The friendship is the fact you're just human. Right. That's it. Right. And we lose fact, about the, humanity. We get caught up in, I'm from this country or skin color, or I believe in Democrat or, or Republican, or this president or not this president, or, the election was stolen and all those type of things. But it all boils down. We're all humans, right?
All human. It goes back to our initial conversation, man. Human connection. Right. You can be with a bunch of strangers and you can connect in 3 seconds flat if you just look around that room and realize how we really are connected.
Right.
Everyone has a voice, and it's okay to tell your story.
Yep.
And it's okay to help people tell their story, and it's okay to listen too,
Yeah. So, and going back to the very beginning, right? The coronavirus, the COVID-19, whatever label you want to put on that, has taught me more than anything that we are one, right? Yeah. We are one, because whether you believe in the virus or not, if viruses can travel around this planet in a very short period of time, right? And it does, right? It just can. And like, for instance, you could be 6 feet away from somebody. This happened to me, right? 6 feet away from somebody in line, but the wind's blowing at my back, right? And so literally blowing in the same direction as the line. And every breath, I can smell the perfume from the lady 6 feet behind me, standing on her red dot, right? Yeah. So she could have just got off a plane from northern Italy when it was like off the charts, right? I have no idea where she come from, but I'm breathing in her being, right? Her smell, her scent, right? So I literally like one step to the left so I could actually smell fresh air versus smelling her. So we are all connected on this intimate level, and we can connect with people, like you said, in 3 seconds and on a level, and you can feel that, immediately, with that. And so I could go on and on and on, and we could, and we're at 1 hour and 11 minutes right now. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah.
Look at that. Well,
Yeah.
well, I appreciate everyone who's still listening and watching.
Yes, exactly. We still have people on. We just got the only comments that came in were from my daughter, right? So
Oh, sweet.
Fancy Pants, hey, great show is what she said. So hey, great show there. And then she likes my rhino, right? So hey, nice rhino. Be happy is what that says right above the rhino. But
Nice.
there's so many things, and Ken, it's like I said, I was looking so forward to this show for a long time, and I'm super excited to have you on the show. This episode 96 there's so many things. I think that it was around 45 minutes that I asked you about the comfort dogs, right? That piece right there could be edited out enough just to be enough, a post within its own.
Absolutely.
And live with its own. I did not have to ask you about what is the power of story, because you delivered and over delivered on what the power of story was throughout the whole show. And so absolutely amazing. And we just got somebody just made a comment here from Facebook. Mindful Intentions. Hi from Canada. Wherever we are on Mother Earth, we are home.
Nice.
And exactly. That is so true.
Nice.
Green heart. And so thank you for the comment. Yeah, it's true, right? We are, right? We are home.
The big narrative is finding home.
Yep.
Every story we've ever heard, we want to find home. We're all looking to go home.
Right. We are. Yeah. And I posted this probably. I didn't really start trying to build a brand and do this type of stuff until I was like February 2019. That I really started doing something like this, right? I didn't have a show. I didn't have those types of things, but just like posting things. And one day I posted, it was just, it was like 5 words: find yourself and do you. Right. I mean, that's our whole goal in life, right? Find yourself, your authentic, true self. I mean, you, like you said, there was that endless summer day that you grabbed a camera, put some media in it, and you recreated Robin Hood. And you basically, that was part of the step of finding who you are. Right. And here you are. I don't know how old you were at that time. You've been in the industry for 25 years, maybe 30, 35 years later. Ken Fay's just doing Ken Fay, right?
Yeah.
Right. And the same thing, like I promised myself when I did the live show that it wouldn't be, a segment of me. It wouldn't be the Restaurant General Manager podcast. It wouldn't be solely Modern Longevitarian. It would be Scott, right? Now I do, and Scott is a lot of the Modern Longevitarian, right? So I love talking about like, eat this, don't eat this, and, breathe this way, don't breathe this way, and do those type of things. I spent a lot of time with those type of things. But I'm now like going down, this trail on this higher level of consciousness, enlightenment, trying to get, outside perspectives, look outside the jar. I grew up as a Southern Baptist, right? So I was reading this book this magazine that I'd bought, one of those $15 magazines you can get in Whole Foods, right? On a subject, right? On the Buddhism and mindfulness, right? So I was like, let me reread this and really like go step 1, step 2, just really do that, right? To understand what those things are. Not that I want to become a Buddhist and classify myself that way. I just want to be an enlightened human. Right. Right. And there's so many commonalities between what Jesus says and what Buddha says. Right. It's about love and respect and understanding and being there for people and comforting people, to do those type of things. So I just want to say thanks. And this has been better than I ever expected. And I was looking forward to this show for a long time. So,
Scott, I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone that's watching your show too. And thank you, man. Thank you for the time, and happy to come out again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. And I just know that you and I are going to collaborate on something down the road, right? We talked about the way of the rhino and the Serengeti and turning that into something. And I've had some ideas for even some children's books about how to, because, it's hard to get an adult to like change their sleeping habits or their diet or things like that. Sure. But if I could impact children, right, in that time frame when they're the most impressionable, right?
Right. And, and honestly, I'm starting to write a children's book as well with a psychologist to talk about trauma for children. So it's directed toward children to help that. So I've started that writing project as well. And, there's a ton of other things I'm working through and working on in that world. I'm helping out with a series on homelessness, a documentary series on hopelessness. I'm helping people as a mentor to that production. And there's just a lot of great story to tell. And there's a lot of meaningful story to tell. And, it's a matter of just doing one to the next, learning from it and growing. Right.
Right. It is, right?
Your audience. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. All right. We got a couple more things have come in, right? So we're starting to get happy Friday to you. This is from Sandra D. Thanks for watching the show. She said, thanks for the talk. So
outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandra, for tuning in. And then again, from Mindful Intentions, wouldn't it be great if we could sustain our lives based on our innate talents?
Oh, what a great, yeah. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. That's the happiness of what you can find. If you can just do the one thing in your day that, that innate talent that you have. And and if you can make a living at it, if you could, whatever it is, that'd be the thing.
We talked about this before the show. We talked about, how, what I wanted Modern Longevitarian to be, right? It's an impact, a brand that makes impact over the next 50 years, not, I'm not going to sell out for short-term money to do that.
Yeah.
And I use the same philosophy as my, I don't know if you can see this or not. It said, this says Hootie, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hootie and the Blowfish, right? Hootie and the Blowfish. They said on this behind the scenes, I think it was like this when they did their Unplugged back when they were famous in the 90s. And they said this, they said, we see every concert as an opportunity just to win over one fan, right? Just one fan. And if Sandra or whoever's behind Mindful Intentions, or even my daughter, Lace, right, sees something on the show and we get one fan of Ken Fay and Scott Stanfield today, that's a success, right?
Yeah.
And for me, right, innate talents, right? I don't know if we may have a draw to something or desire to go somewhere, and we may have talents in those things, but a lot of that's cultivated over loving something enough to stick with it long enough to develop a skill to be able to do that, right? To be drawn to that. It took me 8 years to win my first go-kart race, right? I raced for 15, right? Took 8 years to win my first race. Then I won hundreds of races, right? It became sponsored, won, some big, state and national championships. Also became the Sportsman of the Year for that. And then I lost, for the national series and those things. Blessing to drive with and for the people that I drove with, right? And but it took a long time to do that. And the same thing, it's not this immediate gratification world, right? It's like, what if it takes 8 years for the Modern Longevitarian or Live with Scott or whatever that, It's My Friday was the name of the show for a bit, right? For this show to be able to make the impact on the world, to tell people like, yes, you have a say over your health span, your lifespan, right? Through your environment and your epigenetics. And these are the pillars, and do all those things. What if, right? Yeah. I won't even be 60 in 8 years, right? Yeah. So
stick with it. Yeah.
Yeah. You too, man. I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to see more of your work and what you're doing. And so thanks again.
No, I appreciate it. And I'm open, just as a general, I'm open to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm open to people to connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Ken Fay 1. And if people want to chat and continue the conversation, get in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's how we connected, was on LinkedIn. We've got a network of people that we were with, and I'll share this in the chat, like, hey, Kim was on the show. Sure. Do that. And, with that. And then we had 2 more comments come in, and then we'll wrap this up, right? And we'll do this. Right. I think we're officially the longest show that I've had.
Oh, wow, great. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah. One person can change your life. I speak from personal experience. I have lived on extreme faith my entire adult life. That's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. And then Mindful Intentions again. It took a near-death experience for me to realize my natural-born abilities were connected with my purpose. Sometimes there's 2 ways we learn things. And I don't know your name. It's Mindful Intentions, right? Your brand, right? There's 2 ways we learn things. We learn things through impact, and we learn things through repetition, right? it took me 8 years to win a race, but I had to like repeatedly go to the racetrack and learn and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and do that. Same way with managing a restaurant and that stuff, right? But then we also learn from impact, near life experience. We learn from divorce. We learn from a parent. Like I learned from the impact of both of my parents getting cancer, that the trail I was going down in terms of what I was giving into my body, on my body, lack of exercise. I was on the same genetic expression path as my grandfather, my mom, my dad, all those things. Thanks, Tina. Thanks for tuning in, right? And so Tina's there. And so you're right. That impact really, and we lost Ken, and we're back up here. Yeah, there's back here. But impact and repetition are two we can learn, and that impact really brought you forward. And so blessings to you on that. So Ken, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for everybody out there. Yeah. Keep telling your story. You have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep telling your story. That's the advice. So you'll love that, you know, my trailer here, my call roll credits was kind of loosely inspired by Deadpool. So it's so when I watched it, I was like, I need a new credit. I need a new like ending to the show, right? So I'm gonna roll the credits. I'm gonna take everybody out there to, hey, keep telling your story, find yourself, and do you. Don't stop doing you. Right. All right. Cheers. Thanks for watching. And thanks for a lot. I'll chat with you in a second.
All right.